This is somebody who, from the clips you just paid, seems to think that they can answer the problems of education in America, of healthcare in America, of crime in America. But there's absolutely no meat on the bone.
But back to Kamala, and we have seen snippets of Kamala Harris over the course of the last 3 years. Very few of those snippets have been edifying, Douglas. Here she is as Senator applauding the idea of defunding the police.
Right now, what we're seeing in America is many cities spend over 1/3 of their entire city budget on policing. But meanwhile, we've been defunding public schools for years in America. We've got to re-examine what we're doing with American taxpayer dollars.
And here she is talking about eliminating private health insurance.
You support the Medicare for All bill, I think initially co-sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders. You're also a co-sponsor on it. I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. So for people out there who like their insurance, they don't get to keep it?
Well, listen, the idea is that everyone gets access to medical care. And you don't have to go through the process of going through an insurance company, having them give you approval, going through the paperwork, all of the delay that may require. Who of us has not had that situation where you got to wait for approval and the doctor says, well, I don't know if your insurance company is going to cover this? Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
And it doesn't stop there. She also agreed with the hard left representative AOC's push to eliminate cars in 11 years.
60 Minutes this weekend proudly calling herself a radical, and she's promoting policies like saying that every single carbon emission in the country, every car, should be eliminated within the next 11 years, everything from a 70 to 80% tax rate. Do you agree that she could possibly, in this ideology of the socialist left, could splinter your party?
No. I think that she is challenging the status quo. I think that's fantastic.
Douglas, you mentioned earlier the Obama talking points without the detail. Do we know what she actually believes in and whether and to what extent that would form part of any Democratic policy platform?
No, we have very little idea of what she believes in, actually, because she either says things like, that's why we need to have the conversation about that. That's one of her tricks whenever she gets into a corner where she really doesn't know what to say. And the rest of it, as I said earlier, are sort of banalities. This is somebody who, from the clips you just paid, seems to think that they can answer the problems of education in America, of healthcare in America, of crime in America. But there's absolutely no meat on the bone. The idea is in that first clip that it's an either or in regards to policing or schooling. It's not a lack of money that's the problem in American schooling. It's a lack of decent teaching and a lack of discipline in the schools. There are American students in even the poorer states who have more money per pupil paid by the state for their education than in most countries around the world, and yet they still have some of the worst literacy and numeracy rates. Now, that's not a failing of funding, that's a failing of the teaching unions across America, among much else. Only Kamala Harris can present these complex problems, pretend the solution to them is simply more money, and promise to put more money everywhere, and make it not at all clear exactly how that money would be of any use. As I say, it's all vapid and empty rhetoric, and it's very unclear what she actually believes. She just says what she needs to say to get through the next 10 seconds of any interview or speech.
Which is going to be a huge problem if she, God forbid, turns out to be the president. But there's also been plenty of chatter about who her vice presidential candidate may be. A few suitors have started turning up, being very flattering about Kamala in the last couple of days. Where do you think this will land?
Well, it's actually not clear to me that the most talented people in the party are going to put themselves forward. Does Kamala Harris and your name on a ticket seem at the moment to be a good prospect for you if you're a Democrat, an ambitious Democrat? I think probably not. I think quite a lot of the people that people assumed would get into the race actually won't, if she is certainly the top of the ticket, because they will be the vice presidential running mate to a walking disaster. We'll see. There's a long way to go. In the next sort of almost 4 months. There will be, we've seen just the last week, you mentioned at the top of the show, that just the last week has been an unbelievable amount of things happening, from the attempted assassination of former President Trump to Joe Biden stepping out of the race on Twitter. So almost 4 months, absolutely anything can happen. But I just think that the Democrats are kidding themselves, but no one else, if they think that Kamala Harris is a strong candidate.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very, very fair call. And back to where this week kind of started, obviously with that attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Secret Service head Kimberly Cheadle she's finally stepped down overnight. This is, of course, following the Secret Service's total failure to protect the former President Donald Trump at that rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. They had one job and they absolutely botched it. Here is what Speaker Mike Johnson had to say.
Our reaction, the immediate reaction to her resignation, is that it is overdue. She should have done this at least a week ago. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that she has heeded the call of both Republicans and Democrats. Now we have to pick up the pieces. We have to rebuild the American people's faith and trust in the Secret Service as an agency.
And it's no wonder she had to go, especially after that spectacle that was the questioning by the House Oversight Committee on Monday. Quite a sight to behold, both Democrats and Republicans calling for her resignation. But I think this was probably my favourite exchange of the hearing.
Would you agree that this is the most serious security lapse since President Reagan was shot in 1981 of the Secret Service?
Yes, sir, I would.
And, do you know what Stuart Knight did when he was in charge at the time of the Secret Service? Do you know what he did afterwards?
He remained on duty.
He resigned. What's the difference between your position and what Stuart Knight did?
What I will tell you, sir, is that I am dedicated to finding the answers to what happened. And like every Secret Service agent, we don't shirk from our responsibilities. I will remain on.
Douglas, the hubris that was on display at that hearing was absolutely extraordinary. Why on earth did it take so long for that reality to set in?
Well, I watched that hearing and came away with the view that the now former head of the Secret Service has clearly decided that her aim in the hearing was to say as little as possible whilst presenting herself as being as helpful as possible. She wouldn't answer even the most basic questions like, when did you start preparing for this hearing? She said things like, well, to the best of my recollection, or I can't recall, or it was no skin off her nose if she'd have just said, I started preparing the moment I heard, which was 6 days ago, or whatever. She seemed to be intent on not giving any details in case she could somehow be tripped up on them at some later date in the hearing or afterwards. And that was just a disastrous tactic. She was repeatedly asked about timelines, and it turned out she didn't have them. It really was an embarrassment. She was a political appointee of Joe and Jill Biden, was apparently close to them and respected and liked by them when she was in charge of then Vice President Biden's security detail. She obviously was not the right person for this job. She certainly wasn't the right person to represent herself in front of a congressional hearing. And I think it's probably very good that she's gone. That said, there is an enormous amount that still needs to be found out and interrogated about exactly what did happen that day at the Trump rally, because there's so many security failings that we now know that have come out. And as I said last week, this is, the world was just too close by a couple of millimeters from something utterly catastrophic happening.